Roy Wood Jr.
Well, how are you?
How are you, my friend?
I'm okay. How are you?
Good. Not as busy as you. You seem to be the busiest man in comedy.
I don't know about the busiest. Kevin Hart is the busiest. Kevin Hart is by far the busiest, and then I think Seinfeld gets a lot of stuff done too.
But you're running around doing stuff all the time. You don't have free time.
It's been a blessing. It's been a blessing to have an opportunity to work on a daily show, do what we're doing on This Is Not Happening, try and get a pilot greenlit, and sometimes I'm a daddy.
Yeah, every once in a while.
Yeah, every now and then, they say kids, you're supposed to see them every day. I've read books. I think that's what the books say.
Yeah.
That you should speak to your child every day, especially if he lives in the same house as you.
How close do you come? Because you're out on the road on weekends too, besides these TV shows.
But you know what? I've had to limit that. So now I'm on the road probably 2 weekends a month, and I try to stay out no more than 2 to 3 days at a time, just to make sure that,
right.
I don't want my partner. I don't want her going crazy.
Yeah.
Because my kid, he's 2. He's a lunatic, and he can climb on stuff.
Yeah.
I found him inside the dishwasher, door open, but he had figured out how to pull the bottom tray out and lift that out, and was like literally just exploring the dishwasher.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to leave my girl to that by herself all the time. But I'm at a point in my career where I have a lot of opportunities, and I'm not going to let any of them go. Y'all got to take this from me, man. Because there's a sense of paranoia that I operate from, where I always feel like it could all be over, and I don't think that's paranoia as much as it is fact. Mm-hmm. So sooner or later, the door will close for me, regardless of whatever opportunities I may have now.
There's opportunity ringing right now in your pocket.
Probably so. I thought I'd turn that off. Did I turn that off? Yeah, I did. I think that there's a lot of different ways to go about building your career, but once things start rolling, I feel like it's important to have as many pots on the stove at all time.
Yeah. But have you looked at someone and said, oh, they had all the opportunities and they stayed in the swimming pool too long? I mean, is there somebody, because it's very difficult once you get to that point, you get a nice, comfortable home to then leave it.
I just feel like there's an evolution to your career where you peak, you plateau, and then there's either a rebirth, which gives you another level up, or you either stay at that plateau, or in the case of some comedians, there's a regression. And, I don't feel like there's anybody by name per se, but when I look back on my first 10 years, you gotta remember, my first 10 years of comedy, I was down south. I wasn't on the coast. I wasn't in New York or LA. So I opened for a lot of road guys. And when you open for a lot of different road comedians, you're meeting comedians that are all at different trajectories in their career. Some going up, some going down. I've opened for guys that were battling alcoholism and drugs and divorce. And then I've also open for people that are now doing amazing things themselves. And so I can look back on that first 10 years and go, oh, I see where he made the mistake of not doing that audition, or not going to that showcase, or he decided to choose the bottle over writing material that night. And, I know guys that, we were neck and neck when we started, and some of those guys, here we are, I'm 20 years into my career, and a lot of those guys are in the same position. And a lot of it comes down to work ethic. I really feel like 85% of this business is work ethic, man. It's not even talent. It's not agents and managers. It's just being willing to outgrind anybody else that's doing it. And then and having the emotional endurance to constantly hear no, to constantly fail, to trust that one day your hustle and your talents will get you to where you want to go.
Yeah. And there is no way to know where the next opportunity is, or, because, you
don't know.
Yeah, it's so frustrating because there's no, you're not like moving up in the military, so your rank.
Yeah, it's not a job where there's a linear progression. It's just you trust that each thing you're doing will get you to the next thing. You're running in the dark, but you trust everything that you've done up until that point that's gotten you this far.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't continuing to hustle get me a little bit further. When I look at where I was before the Daily Show, so if we're going back summer of 2015, I was coming off of a sitcom that had just gotten canceled by TBS. And I'd done a couple of auditions in LA for a couple of roles, and I booked a pilot or two, and none of it went. But during that time, that entire year, I was going on ESPN once or twice a month and doing segments on ESPN. Wasn't paid, it was no big deal. I like talking sports, I like cracking jokes. But it was those appearances that ended up catching the eye of one of the producers of The Daily Show, which got me the audition.
Yeah.
So that wasn't the plan. I didn't even know that The Daily Show was looking for other people. I auditioned for The Daily Show in 2008 and completely laid a turd. It's a terrible, terrible audition. So I was like, all right, I'll never be on that show. Like, this is how bad my audition was. I auditioned the same day as Wyatt Cenac, who went on to have an amazing Emmy Award-winning run with the show, and he's now doing his own thing on HBO. And I go in, I do my audition, and I feel like I think that was okay. All right, I guess. I leave the room. Wyatt goes in. I realize I left my car keys and phone in the room. So I have to sit in the chair and wait for Wyatt's audition to conclude before I can go in. The laughs coming from that room.
Yeah.
While I'm sitting on the other side of the door, like, it's just
Yeah.
and Wyatt would say something else, and then you hear the person, and I knew I didn't get the job.
Yeah.
Like, I knew they didn't laugh like that for me.
Right. But also, he was probably at a place where he kind of knew who he was.
Wyatt was good and deserved the job.
Yeah.
They're still laughing as Wyatt walks out. I walk back in. The laughter stops on a dime. Hey, I just left my phone and get my ego. I think my ego was over there on the ground too. I picked that up, and I see y'all later. Y'all take it easy. So based on that audition, I'd have never thought that I got an opportunity with The Daily Show, but you just don't know what the next thing is going to be or what leads to what. And that's what I've always trusted. When I started on the road, the kind of the pact I made with myself as a comedian when I started, and this is 98, I'm 19. The goal every month was to perform comedy in a different city. Not a insurmountable goal, but the more you hit the cities in that 3 to 4 hour radius of Tallahassee and Birmingham, where I'm back and forth to, it gets harder every month. So every month you're having to book a city a little further out. Or if I'm performing in Little Rock, then you know what? I'm going to add a Tuesday night in Oklahoma City. But now that means on Monday you have nothing. The last night in Oklahoma City, the last night in Little Rock is Sunday. And you got a gig in Oklahoma City on Tuesday. So you got nothing to do on the Monday. So you got to figure out where you're going to kill that time. You go to Oklahoma City early. Do you backtrack to Memphis and see if you can get on set? But going back to Birmingham is out of the question because you got to be in Oklahoma on Tuesday to do 5 minutes unpaid. But you'd meet another comic who knew a guy who booked a thing. And if your 5 minutes went okay, then it was an opportunity to get a little deeper into those comedy markets. And that's the only way you can survive down south is performing in multiple areas. And then I would get slick where I would perform, like, take a city like Oklahoma City. Like, the way comedy works in the Midwest and in the South is that your stature in one city dictates whether or not the next city over respects you. So in order to get booked in Nashville, you need to be doing well in Chattanooga or Birmingham. So the bigger cities pull from the smaller cities in a sense. So I figured that out real fast because Nashville wasn't going to book you if you don't work Birmingham, why would you work Nashville? Birmingham's a great. So each club is judging your resume. So I would go to Oklahoma City and do a free show for I would do a 5 to 7 minute set. I would record it on VHS back in these days. I was renting cameras, man. I was renting these big ass cameras from Rent-A-Center, and or I would go to Circuit City. I would buy VHS cameras from Circuit City and use them for 2 weeks. They had a 13-day return policy. So on the 12th day, I would go back to Circuit City and say, "Yeah, I just this the battery quality is just not what I had hoped on this camera." And back in those days, you had to pay a restocking fee, so it was like $40. So basically, for $40, I got to rent a camera for a week and a half. And so I would go to Oklahoma. I'm just using Oklahoma City as an example. I go to OKC. I would video my 7 minute set, take that set, cut out the intro and the outro of my performance, so it looks like a segment of what was a longer performance. So I would cut out the "Hey, how you doing?" and I would cut out the "Thank you, good night," and all you would see is just the meat. I would send that 7 minute snippet to Tulsa, to Dallas, to Kansas City, to Topeka, anywhere else within 4 hours of Oklahoma City, because I knew those cities respected comics that worked Oklahoma City. So I would send the 7 minute segment and go, "Here's a snippet of my set." And I never said it was a 30-minute set. I just said it was a snippet of my set. I technically did not lie. And I would book those cities because they figured, well, he works Oklahoma City. He's got to be funny enough to play Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. So those were the little games that you had
Did
to
anybody
play.
teach you that, or this is something you were just picking up that I got to get
Just
out there?
picking up, man.
Yeah.
You just figure out how to cut corners and how to lie and how to, because everybody's trying to get over on everybody, and you just have to figure out a way to stand out. Like that's the hardest part of all of this. You're sending VHS tapes to strangers, and this is before sending links and clicking a YouTube or whatever. I had to convince you that I was worth the trouble to take a big ass VCR tape and put it in a console and sit and watch me. So I would print my resumes in color. I would do color headshots for some clubs. I designed these folders. Thank God for my journalism degree and some of the graphic design that I learned, because I was able to put a little more razzle dazzle into the paperwork and and all of the packaging. The packaging, I would sit in a hotel all night after a show and just design little labels. My business cards were in color on gloss. I lived at FedEx, excuse me, Kinko's back in those days.
Yeah.
I don't recognize FedEx
Yeah.
office. The shit is Kinko's. It will always be Kinko's. And that's where I lived, man, and just design stuff that, at least if it looked professional when it came out the envelope, maybe you'd respect me more. And if at minimum my shit is going to stand out on your desk, because you got to stack. And I've seen it.
Yeah.
When you go to get paid at the end of the week, you see, I call it the stack of dreams. You see the stack of dreams sitting in the corner, and it's all white, it's all manila, it's all the same. It just looks like just visual, just boringness. And so you want to be that one thing that's visually disruptive. You got to go color, which costs a little more. So you might have to work a daily pay job on that Monday between Little Rock and Oklahoma City, just to make sure you have an extra $40, which is fine. But like, those were the things that, I don't know. I just started figuring out that I just felt like being funny was never going to be enough to excel faster. I do feel like I stayed in the South too long, and I think it stymied some of my creative growth, because you pick up bad habits when you perform with comedians that aren't as driven, and not necessarily just performatively, but in terms of your job and your desires. Because in New York, part of why New York is always the best place to do comedy, it has nothing to do with the rooms. It's everybody here feels like failure is coming tomorrow. So you can't even walk slow in this city.
Yeah, it's true. And
Everything has to be done under pressure, and it makes you drive and push harder because you're around people that are also pushing, and you see more people, so it's more of an influence, where I only saw 2 comedians a week.
yeah, and you're going on. I mean, I wonder how it is to work out new material in New York, because you're going up right after somebody who killed, and you're right on before somebody who kills, and you're like, how, do I want to drop the room energy at all as they work this out?
It depends. It depends on the room. Some rooms you got to just, as I call it, keep your reputation intact.
Yeah.
and go on hit them with the hits
Yeah.
and get off the stage. But if it's a night where the energy is proper and you know you can get away with some stuff, the good thing about New York is that there's rooms here that are set up explicitly for new jokes, and it's set up exactly for people to do new material. So the energy is set up in a way where you can delve into that type of stuff. But you know, there's been nights where you have to follow Louis, Chappelle, Rock, and then Kevin Hart, and then it's you, and you just want to do well enough to say, yeah, I belonged on the stage with all those other people you saw. And you may do one or two new jokes, but I just think in New York, it's a city where you pick your spots to break new jokes, but most venues are for polishing material
Yeah.
that's already proven. And then you take it out on the road and see how much of it they hate in middle America.
But it is true that like with comedy now, it's like jazz was in the 50s in New York, where you're going to be going up with Bird or Train, and you couldn't, you're playing at a very high level,
Yeah,
all the time now.
you have to be. And I think that this market demands that. And that's what I mean when I talk about the pressure, because now between sets, when you those 10 minutes in that cab from gig to gig, you aren't texting, you're listening to audio from what you just said to figure out what you can improve when you get to the next performance. And that's not what was happening
Yeah.
when I was in the South and in the Midwest like that. I remember going through a stretch of years. This headliner showed me, like, when I think about advice that headliners have given me, the Comedy Cellar here in New York is probably, well, in my opinion, it is the best place to watch comedy on the planet Earth. And it's one of the few clubs that foreign comics have a desire to perform in,
Yeah.
because they know if you can do it here, then you got something. And there's a table in the back of the Comedy Cellar where a lot of comedians just kind of sit and fellowship between gigs. Or if you got an 8 o'clock spot and you don't have another spot till 11, you go to the cellar and you chill out at this table. And sometimes there's headliners there and people that have done more than you, and it's a great spot to get advice and have conversations about the business and the pratfalls of it. And well, I'm working on this script and I'm pitching it when you pitched your show to the network, blah 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 blah. And you're getting real valuable advice that's not in a book, that you can't get from a class, from someone that's tried and true. When I was on the road in the South, a headliner showed me one night how to get free drinks from the audience. It's a solid trick. Still works to this day if I want a free drink, but it's not the same
Right.
advice.
Yeah.
Which, for the record, what you do, halfway through your set, you have the waitress bring you a shot to the stage. And then you go, who did this? You go, someone in the crowd wanted you to have a shot. And I go, no, thank you. That's so nice. You do the shot. Then someone else in the crowd goes, well, I like him. I'm not gonna let that person one up me. So then people start sending you shots for real because of one shot that you basically used to kickstart the whole flow. And that's how I would drink for free for like 4 or 5 years. But now that advice is useless.
Yeah.
Is my point. It doesn't help me now.
Well, you know what else has changed since you started is these kind of specialty shows, and you're hosting one now, which is a storytelling show.
Correct.
But that didn't exist years ago. People would just go up and do their acts, and now when you're a comedian, you're expected to do several types of acts.
Yeah, there's a lot of different types of stand-up, and what I love about this is not happening, and what Ari Shafir, who created and was the original host for 3 seasons before me, did was he created a space for an atypical style of comedic storytelling, which it almost borderlines on a monologue in a way, but it's just a funny story. It's a wild, crazy story that really happened, and it's told to us by people that we traditionally wouldn't have thought to have gone through those things or those experiences. Howie Mandel, who's a well-documented germaphobe, told a story about the time he fell off the side of a freeway and like fell into a ravine or whatever. He was germaphobe, and he's trying to potty train his daughter, and they stop on the side of the freeway. Somehow, I don't want to spoil the story, but he ends up covered in muck,
Yeah.
and so it's his reaction to how he climbed back up the hill or whatever. So it's good, because traditionally when you see comedy on TV, especially now, 10 years ago it was a little better, but stand-up comedy is not showcased as often as it was in the past. Like if we go back to Def Comedy Jam and BET's Comic View, and Premium Blend on Comedy Central, there was a time where stand-up comedy, you could watch that in prime time on television 5 nights a week on various channels. And now Friday nights on Comedy Central, and you have whatever you have on Netflix, and there's some half hours, and they're doing 15-minute specials, and you have that. And of course, you've always had late night, but what you've never had in any of these spheres was a place for comedians to tell longer stories. Instead of the 4-minute Jay Leno or the Letterman sets, now you have a guy telling an 8-9 minute story. And when you get someone like Drew Carey or Talib Kweli, or these guys who normally don't come down from the mountain to bless you with the gym because they're doing other things, or you associate them with other stuff, it's cool. It's very cool. And I was honored to be asked to host it, because for me, there should always be a place for comedians to exist and do what they do best, which is tell the truth. And there's enough places to just tell a joke, but here you tell a story. And that's something that I believe creates an environment year after year for other comedians who may not be getting on TV as often, or have a style that doesn't always lend itself to 5 minutes on Jimmy Fallon. And they're still waiting on Netflix. They're still working out contracts with HBO and Showtime. But in the meantime, you still get to see a piece of their world. And that's what makes the show.
Right.
It's totally one of a kind.
Yeah, some of these stories are sad or horrifying, but then the humor mixes in it. But so you would never do that as part of your set.
Dude, I told a story about the night I met Luther Campbell at a strip party and was honored to have met him. Seth Meyers isn't going to greenlight that joke. Like, there's just not enough time.
Yeah.
There's no way to tell that story. Like, I have a great story about the time my mother and I met Rod Stewart in London, and that's a 7-10 minute story. Like, there's just, unless I tell it in an hour special, there's nowhere else for me to tell that story. And my stand-up, it's not inherently storytelling. So for me to tell that type of story during my comedy special would be a departure from what I do traditionally, which doesn't mean I can't do it, but this is a much better place to do it, because this is over here. This is what everybody's doing. So it's understood. It's like New Joke Night. It's the train of thought and how this is absorbed by the viewer is different.
Well, do you have to go out and work that story a little bit, or do you go up cold?
Oh no, you work that story for a year, bro.
Yeah.
Like, easily a year. Most of the comedians that are on This Is Not Happening, they are just refining, and they send the story to the producers who will go through it and look at it. And by the time I was on the host this year, the lineup had already been selected. So most of these guys had already worked one-on-one with Ari, and Ari is a master storyteller. And there's certain comedians that are just naturals at it. Joey Diaz is a natural, Ali Sadiq is a natural, but if you look at their style of stand-up, it's also storytelling. Most of what they do in long form is take you on a journey with a beginning, middle, and end. A lot of my comedy is just me being mad about all the wrong shit. Like that. It's nothing like a Rod Stewart adventure.
But that's true. Like, to have good stories happen to you, you normally have to be living an edgier life. Like Stanhope telling you anything from his life is hilarious.
I think all of that, yes to that, but I also think just because there isn't drugs or a dildo or anything crazy involved doesn't mean it's not a good story. There was Lil Rel Howery from the movie Get Out. He told a story this season that's on one of the upcoming episodes about watching his father fight a bunch of gangbangers because they were leaning on his car. And if I remember the story correctly, I think his daddy got his ass whooped, but he got the respect of the gangsters.
Yeah.
And they never touched his car again. Like, it's just weird stuff that you have to figure out a way to make it relatable to the people that are viewing it. And that's what I thought, because that was my first thing when they said, well, we want you to host the show. And I go, okay, but I've never done cocaine. So I don't know what stories I can tell you. Like, I did shrooms once, but nothing happened. Like, I didn't go out in public on them. Like, I hid in the corner. But like everybody else, their drug stories are in a public place. And I'm like, no, I did shrooms and I stayed in my apartment and I played video games and went to sleep. That's a terrible story.
Right. Yeah.
But you know, you start, the first thing I started doing was just dissecting my life and things that I've gone through. And then I started realizing there's a lot of stuff that's happened to me that's worth talking about on stage. It's just that my comedy was never about me. My stand-up is always about us and what we're going through and what we're experiencing. So it's just a different beat. It's just, you know, if you know how to play guitar, you can play jazz. That's what you've always been known to play. But now they're asking you to come over here and do a little rock or do a little country. For as long as you know how to read music, you can do it. I told a story, I don't think it's on this season, but the time that we did a show for some drug dealers. That's also in the South. You do a lot of shows for drug dealers. Because they do comedy shows to wash their dirty money. Or they do the comedy shows to re-up. Like, if you have the basic premise of the story is that they didn't have the money to pay us and they offered to pay us in cocaine. And I didn't know how to sell cocaine. And this is like 2002, so you can't even Google.
Right, yeah.
Because if I'd have Googled it and found out what's the process, how do you, maybe I should get the cocaine. And so it's a story about what happens when you're in one of these impossible situations where someone pulls a gun on you and tells you that you better perform or they're going to put a bullet in your head, or I can pay you in cocaine. And it's like, and now I'm supposed to ride home with this? I'm supposed to. And he didn't even have bags for it. Like, it was a brick, and you got to figure out how to, like, I don't know, do I put it in a Starburst wrapper? Like, how do I transport this cocaine home? So it was a precarious situation, and that was one that I would have never even explored had I not been hosting the show. Because I go, oh yeah, that was funny, that did happen. It just didn't fit my mold of comedy and the type of comedy I enjoy doing.
But see, you're actually doing 2 gigs now that weren't really of your background, where it's just straight, you know, the comedy news, there's ripped from the headlines and storytelling. Both of those opportunities that you got are different than the whole path that you led up to that.
Yeah. Daily Show is probably way closer than the storytelling, for sure. The Daily Show is interesting because, so my degree is in broadcast journalism, but I did radio, so I never really, radio is a different style of journalism, especially when you're just doing urban morning radio and just cracking jokes between songs from 6 to 10. It's not the same as hardcore AM, Ed Bradley, serious news magazine stuff. But I did have an interest in it. And the cool thing about the Daily Show is that when I have the bit or the thought about an issue that I can't quite put into words on stage, I know that I can bring it to the show and pitch it, and they'll figure out how to make it work. And it may not even be something that fits for me performatively on the show. It may be something that goes to someone else. We did a couple of segments in 2017 called Black Eye on America, and they were basically just my own weird observations of Black issues in the world of journalism. And we basically made a compilation video of all of the stressed out facial expressions that Black news pundits make while arguing on cable news. And if you look at it, you could see over the course of a couple of years, like, we pulled footage of Angela Rye from CNN from 2015, like pre-Trump, post-Trump, and like you could see just the gradual and Don Lemon. We all know the evolution of Don Lemon. Don Lemon was astute and upright, and I'm Don Lemon. And now he's like, "Are you ready? Are you done? Get off my show. I'm drunk. I want a tattoo." Like, this man is drunk on New Year's Eve getting tattoos on live television. So there's something there's something in the water
Yeah.
with this, and that's something that I can't perform on stage, but on the show with clips and proper editing, I can get that point across more clearly on the show than I ever could on stage.
Well, you know, we're sitting here talking about never knowing where opportunity is going to come in. The fact that Trevor Noah has that show is like one of the craziest things, that a kid could grow up in South Africa, come here, get that show, and be talking to Americans about their own news.
Mm-hmm.
It's nobody saw that coming.
No, nobody. And I think him coming from, like, how crazy is it that we were able to hire a guy like, you're from a place that's kind of worse than here. Could you come over here and help us make sense of our nonsense?
Right. Yeah.
Like, you know, because I don't want to get into the segregation versus apartheid argument. We could I don't want to start oppression. My struggle was more struggle than your struggle. I don't want that argument, but he's definitely had a lot of parallels growing up to what we experience here today. So thankfully, a lot of what he's talking about isn't unfamiliar territory to him. And I think I tell him this every day. I'm like, you better than me, man, because I would just be cussing. Like, like, I feel like I can only speak for myself. I can't speak for other hosts, but I know for me emotionally, I'm too close to all of this stuff. You know, I grew up in a pretty bad neighborhood in Birmingham, Alabama, and I've seen enough people affected by enough things in this country that for me to be able to go on the air and be level-headed enough to make sure that the jokes land, because comedy is the priority, because you're coming to us to be able to laugh a little bit while getting the truth. So we have to take the comedy part of it seriously. Otherwise, we're just another news show. And that's the one thing that delineates us. So we have to prioritize comedy. And comedy that comes from a level-headed place is inherently different from angry comedy. You can go more places when you're calm, comedically, and still deliver the truth, still call out the bullshit, and still be able to do the job the right way. And I think Trevor being from another country helps him keep the ship on that course comedically, because I know if it was me and I'm hosting and one of them crooked ass police verdicts came down and we go live that night, I'm like, let me tell y'all about these assholes. And that's not funny.
Right. But do you think maybe because he even grew up where he grew up, he sees the way, how long it takes for any kind of change to make? Or because he seems to be very even all the time.
Yeah, I think Trevor is from a country that was, 10 to 20 years ahead of America when it comes to some degree of racial reconciliation. And they still have their issues in South Africa, and I can't speak to it in depth, but they're definitely in a different area politically than America is, which is ironic considering that desegregation ended before apartheid.
Right. I mean, they were way behind us for decades.
Correct. And so, there's a lot of different things. I mean, it's all kinds of stuff going on in South Africa now. Like, they're taking land away from white farmers who got the land illegally, or the land was never, they never had a right to purchase the land because the land was illegally obtained by white people in the past. So that's insane to just have black people rolling up to white farmers and going, yeah, this was never your land. You've got 2 days. Go call a U-Haul.
Yeah. And
they are compliant. And they're like, okay, I understand that. That's not cool, but let's figure it out. That could never. Could you imagine if black people in New Orleans rolled up to the areas that have been gentrified post-Katrina and said, hey, man, I kind of lived here before Katrina. I'm going to need the keys to your condo.
Yeah, and it's not happening.
It would never happen.
Yeah.
So even in that regard, they're a little bit ahead of the curve. So I think Trevor knows that, and he's able to use that because it gives him a different perspective on everything.
I was actually just thinking that Trump basically ran on the fear that that might happen someday. You know what I mean? Like here, there's this thing of the whole "Make America Great Again" is almost like we're looking back at some imaginary great time that took place.
Yeah, I just think we're just going through a full reboot. Like you see, they're bringing back all these '90s shows,
Right? Yeah.
and Trump is just bringing back '50s America.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, let's just go. Wouldn't it be nice if there were no trans people in the military, right? Oh no, okay,
Yeah.
okay. Like Trump loves to throw stuff out, then back off of it, like a dude trying to get laid. Wouldn't it be nice if you came up to my room? I mean, but if you don't want to, it's cool. It's cool. If you don't want to come up, it's cool. We can just stay down here at the bar, no problem.
But that is such a because he has such energy and there's something different happening every day with him. It's almost I think tougher for comedy because you could do a Bush joke that would last a while or a Clinton joke that would last a while. You could write a great Trump joke and 3 days later it's toast.
3 days, try 12 hours. We almost didn't do a Space Force joke. Like when you look at the way the news cycle
Yeah.
goes, you know, we're on a 12-hour news cycle, and this we tape at 6 o'clock. Trump does the space. We should have a Air Force, a Navy, and a Space Force. He drops that quote around 5 o'clock. At that point, we're already in rewrite. We're 30, 40 minutes from taping the show.
Yeah.
It's too late. And if you do a joke, it's going to be a quick and passing joke.
Yeah.
You really want to take time to digest and really flesh. This quote is so crazy, it needs to be explored. And so then the debate the next day was, he said this at 5 p.m. on a Monday. Is a Space Force joke still funny at 11 p.m. on Tuesday?
Right. And that would have
And-
that line would have followed, let's say, George Bush for 5 years. We would have been calling him Commander of
Oh.
Space Force for
Yeah,
5 years.
For 5 years. That
Yeah.
would have just been
Yeah.
Lieutenant Commander of the Space. But to be fair, Bush only dropped a scandal like twice a year.
Right. Yes, exactly.
Like Trump is like the binge model where you get like 40 scandals at one time. You can't even take them all in and say, well, Space Force, but the porn star wants some money and he's got to pay the porn star. What? He fired the dude? Oh my God, he fired another dude. Oh.
Yeah.
Like that's what we're up against, where you literally don't know. He fired the dude. There's a Space Force. Wait, he's going to North Korea. Oh my God, he's
Yeah.
going to meet with the North sanctions. What do you mean sanctions in Russia? Like you can't keep up with all of it. So you literally have to pick two things and just hope that those jokes are unique enough.
But you will, with that show, with the Daily Show, maybe have to just shake everything within a matter of hours. And it's just like, well, this just popped up today. Let's move everything.
You gotta go. You gotta
Yeah.
go where everything is. You know, and the people who have it even harder are the digital expansion department, who do a lot of our web content, because they're able to do stuff that we know won't make it on the show, but they have to respond. Like you want to talk about a quick response, you have to be on it. They're even more stressed because they have to do jokes within the hour, because if it's going to be something the internet's going to joke about, it's stale within 2 hours. You've heard all the jokes, you've seen them all. When Scaramucci got fired, Scaramucci got fired at Friday at 5 o'clock. Our building usually empties out around 4:30 on a Friday because it's just a writing day. The rumors start. The digital expansion team goes, okay, we're gonna stay. Let's see what happens. And he gets fired at, let's say, 5:20. By 5:40, we have jokes on the internet about him, because we don't have a broadcast, but we have to be in the conversation constantly now, because politics is moving so fast that's part of why the digital department is just as important as the broadcast wing of the show, because we have to constantly be on top of things. When Frances McDormand had her Oscar stolen, her Oscar was stolen on a Sunday night, and you got the guy going around taking selfies with her Oscar. And so our digital department, within 12 hours, created a 3 billboards parody picture of Frances McDormand demanding answers as to where her Oscar was. And that's the type of thing, if you wait too late into the night,
Exactly.
there's no joke on it. And there's definitely no joke to be said on Monday night about a stolen Oscar on Sunday, not in depth. You could do a quick one-liner and keep it moving, but the digital department, it's even harder for them because they have to be on alert around the clock because you don't know when the shit's going to hit the fan with this guy.
Yeah.
Anytime. Like
Yeah.
it could, you never know. Is Omarosa fired? I don't know. Well, let's
Yeah.
get some stuff ready just in case.
And suddenly, comedy is the fire department now, where a bell goes off and everybody's going to start running.
Yeah.
It never used to happen that
Yeah.
way. Carson used to take weeks off at a time, and everyone just waited for him to come back.
Suicide.
Yeah.
Suicide.
Yeah.
The only reason John Oliver is able to do it because his show is not topical in the sense of here's today's issue.
Yeah.
Like the way someone explained it to me beautifully is that John Oliver doesn't always talk about the weather. He talks about the climate. And so it's more of the totality of an issue and where we are as a whole. And the first act of his show, there's some topical stuff that's happened then, but you know the style of show that Oliver's doing, and they're comfortable in that. And also the stuff that they do takes so damn long to research, they deserve a couple weeks off.
Right, yeah.
But I can't think of anyone else in the unscripted political sector that takes more than a week or maybe 10 days off at a time. And Oliver goes months. He's the only one that does it.
Well, let's talk about this pilot, because this is another, kind of a left-hand turn for you. You'd be doing a different type of show completely again, right?
Yeah. So the show is called Reestablished, and it's a buddy comedy about two probation officers and them working their caseload in a city in the South. And I'm producing it with Trevor Noah and Aaron Magruder, who's the creator of the Boondocks. And the goal of the show is, of course, to be funny, but to also kind of shine a light on a wing of law enforcement that I don't think we know that much about, and also shine a light on a group of Americans that we don't know much about and that we also tend to dismiss because they made a mistake. And I think there's a lot of comedy in that world, and there's also a lot of truth about what happens when the criminal justice system lets people down, what happens when 2 or 3 things go wrong for a person and they're back in jail, or what happens when you have someone in the judicial system who doesn't care about you and you go back to jail, even though you might be a good person. So there's a lot of different avenues of morality that we can explore with the show. And I'm just excited that Comedy Central gave me a chance to do something that's damn complicated.
Comedically, the thing I think that's so brilliant about it is you get to move different characters through your show all the
Correct.
time. So that's always the best kind of comedy to have. If you could think of a reason to bring somebody in for an episode or two, that could kill it for you.
Yeah, it definitely helps, and those are also people that you can revisit. Now, the show won't feel like Reno 911, but that's the type of show where you had the core officers, and then you had the people in the community who they were either arresting or chasing, and there were randoms, but there were also recurring people who they were always having to deal with and always having to tend to their problems. And I think that's a place where you can get a lot of ripe comedy, with what they're doing right now with Atlanta. Atlanta does something similar, but they do it with a lot of people that you would have never, I don't like the phrase no names, but actors that have been undiscovered and that you don't know anything about. And you drop them into this world with Donald Glover and his co-stars, and you see what happens. Cat Williams was in the premiere, and he plays Glover's uncle. And so now all I'm waiting on is I can't wait till Cat Williams comes back.
Yeah.
And you're able to bring in these cool co-star elements and stuff. But much like the Daily Show, first and foremost, it's got to be funny. You can worry about all that message shit later. That's first
make
and foremost,
it funny,
and
it'll all come through.
And I think if you base it in truth in that world, I think it's something that will honor those people. I've done, I'd say about 8 hours of interviews with various probation officers in the New York City probation system, as well as some down south. And because I really want to make sure that we nail the nuance of this occupation, because it's not one that's glamorous. It's not a lot of foot chasing and all of that stuff, but probation officers spend the most time with anyone that's arrested in any branch of law enforcement. Everybody else is either taking you to jail or making sure you stay in jail. A probation officer is the only one trying to make sure you stay out of jail.
Yeah. And the burnout of that
So
job's got to be pretty amazing too,
yeah,
because you become fond of someone and they screw up again.
yeah.
You know.
And so that's kind of what we're trying to explore a little bit with the show is, what leads to those mistakes and how do those mistakes affect you as a law enforcement officer, especially when in a lot of districts, this is a little known fact, and I didn't know this until I did the interviews, a lot of police officers don't like probation officers. There's a legitimate butting of the heads because in a cop's mind, in a lot of cops' minds, it's lock them up. They should be in jail. In a probation officer's mind, it's wait, let's not lock them up. Let's figure out why and what and how. And the cop is like, no, lock them up. And there's instances sometimes where they're both not wrong, which is interesting to me because there have been cases in this country where someone on probation who did something wrong was given another chance and they went out and killed somebody or hit somebody or domestic violence. Like there's just the list goes on and on. But then there's also great stories of people who are given second chances and they went on to make something of themselves. And how do you discern between the two when all you have is a facial expression and a file to look at? How do you assess these people?
Well, you never see a politician run on rehabilitation. They always run on punishment. And then those guys get out after, we've taken away their TVs or, whatever. And they come out angry and it doesn't really fit society. But this thing is it's always such a long haul to help somebody get over any kind of what I would consider mental illness in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and a lot of it, you could even call it PTSD in a lot of regards. If you talk about the violence in a lot of communities and what a lot of people come up dealing with, that contributes sometimes to a feeling of helplessness, and you may end up going back to a life of crime or whatever. But it's something that I think. It's a story that matters, and it's a story that's rarely told, if ever told, in the research that I've done in terms of television shows that are out there.
Right. So
I'm excited about it.
Have you shot the pilot yet? Or are you writing it?
No, Aaron and I are still scribbling out the pilot and just getting all the beats of it together. And then I figure at some point we'll shoot down south this spring, and it needs to be the spring because the South after April.
Yes.
Like I'm writing a script and I just keep trying to write indoor scenes because I know the humidity and the mosquitoes. I just know it's going to be torture, but that's part of the story, and it's got to be down south. I don't want to cheat that.
Well, that is something that you bring. You're not a East Coast, West Coast guy, and you keep that Alabama thing in your comedy all the time, and there's a comfort for you too with your childhood, right? With that background.
I also feel like I'm one of the few people that has the rare opportunity to change perceptions of Southern living. So if I have an opportunity to put a camera on something that's happening in the South, it's not going to be people barefoot on a dirt road, or it's not going to be slavery. Like those stories have been told. And there's a lot of good people just living a regular, normal life, and they are not like a judge who may have dated a 14-year-old
right,
and then ran for Senate in Alabama. We're not all like that.
Yeah.
And then, it's also important for me because, I don't know who's watching me. Like I've credited, like I'll talk about like people like, oh, these are the people I watched when I started. These are the comedians that I always loved. But for me, the comedian that really convinced me that I could do this for a living was a guy named Ricky Smiley. And so Ricky Smiley is also from Birmingham and dominated comedy and has a syndicated show with numbers neck and neck with Steve Harvey and Tom Joyner nationally. But at the time, in the 90s, Ricky got on BET's Comic View and screamed Alabama from the top of his lungs. It wasn't even a joke. He's just a dude from Alabama on TV, and he just Alabama, and nobody will ever understand what that meant to me because Ricky Smiley is from 4 exits up the freeway from me, and in the South, you're bred to believe that what you do doesn't matter or that you could never make it. Like this world of entertainment is painted as some sort of faraway galaxy that you must, the
Sure.
odds of you ever getting over there to Hollywood, and it's not that hard. It's around the corner. It's not, you just have to get up and work for it. And so I bought into that for a while. I bought into the fact that, well, I'm in Alabama. I'm just go get me a job and then get a wife and Jesus and then eat macaroni on chicken on Sundays. And then, but then you see this dude from your hometown on TV saying he's from Alabama. We've had people from Alabama do stuff, but it's mostly athletics or it's music. He did what I do. We do the same thing.
Right.
And he made it? Oh, hell. Well, then where do I sign up for open mic? And that's, I'll never forget how seeing Ricky Smiley made me feel. So anytime I get an opportunity, yeah, if I get on TV, I gotta, not every time, but I gotta make sure that people know that, as Andre 3000 said, people gotta know that the South got something to say.
Right.
And that's really important to me. And I may not even shoot the show in Alabama. I don't know if we'll be able to. I don't know the tax laws as far as the entertainment tax incentives or whatever, but for as long as it's the South, then people in the South all know that they matter. They see their stories and their experiences being represented. Then that, to me, that's worth something. That's very important.
It is funny. I mean, to this day, there's a part of the South that is really misunderstood or underappreciated or just seen as far away. You know.
Yeah, it's and there are bad parts of the South.
Right.
There are bad people down there. There is racism, but there's also amazing music and culture and people, and it's a lot of good things are still coming out of this place. So nothing is one dimensional, you know? And I think it's important to just be able to try and paint those stories and just show the complexities of that type of life.
So this is the dream show for you. This, out of everything that you've done, it all seems to be coming to this place. Do you feel that way? Or, I mean, you're working with people. If you just look
Yeah.
who your partners on this with, imagine thinking about that 5-10 years ago. It would
Yeah, I
have been
wouldn't.
yeah.
I wouldn't have thought that. I wouldn't have thought that I would have that opportunity to tell that story. I'm just, from a failure standpoint, I'm leery of
Mhm.
ever stopping and looking back at anything or taking assessment of it. Because to me, it's just work, do the work, do the work. Don't stop, do the work. Because you stop to go, yeah, I done all right. Then
Yeah.
that's when it's juggling, and you start with 2 balls and then 3 balls, then a chainsaw and an apple, and at no point can you say, "Ooh, I'm juggling apples and yeah, your arm is cut off."
Yeah.
So I'd rather focus, and it is dope. And there's, to me, my dream would be able to pull a Will Packer or Oprah Winfrey or now a Gerard Carmichael and have a production deal and be able to green light other shows and create opportunities for other people, especially people of color. Like that's the dream. It's
Yeah.
like being able to leave something, because, let's be real about entertainment and what it is. I'm 39 and I'll be 40 at the end of this year. So best case scenario, no ageism involved. I probably get to 55 years old in front of the camera for most comedic roles. There's not a lot of there's fewer comedic lead roles the older you get, and even fewer for men of color. So at that point, my brain now is thinking about that point. So now at that point, I need to have built enough equity with my fans over the next 15 years to make sure that I can tour until I die off of everything I did in that 10 to 15 year stretch. And also in that time, make sure that I now have a house of creation set up for other people coming after me, where I can create opportunities for them as well. And then also make them write into the show a role for a 55-year-old man.
Well, I'll tell you this, and you know I've been a fan of yours for a while. You're already beating the odds, and keep juggling those chainsaws, my man. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it.
Redwood Jr.,
Thank
this
you
is
all.
not happening. Fridays, midnight, Comedy Central. Thank you so much.
Thank you, man. You made me sound intelligent. Thank you all.